static image? Or is that not appropriate?
Having like a video as a base layer of the map, or just have that pop up when you click on something.
Just having stuff being automated and visual, and just using it as a tool to have something disappear or lay over it.
Yeah, I mean, anything can be a layer. In this case, it's map data or map tiles, but you could pull in graphics, or I guess you could pull in video. I can't think of any reason why you couldn't, but it's just a case of loading it up and displaying it. You can pull in vectors. People are using the Raphael.js library. I don't know if anybody's come across that to do some pretty crazy things. So yeah, people have got like flashing beacons overlaying the map for using like online gamings or like real world / online mashups. Yeah.
On the markers, there were some pop-ups with information. Can you speak a bit about how you can access or theme or pull out? Obviously you can get anything from views, but as it relates to this particular system, can you create links to nodes and?
Yep. I think we cover that here. I think it's a slide later on. I'll come back to it if we don't. Yeah, it's one of the latest slides, so I'll make sure to pull out the kind of the customizing those pop-ups. For the styles, that defines how the features will display. So like in the last example, we had the red markers. You can use custom images. You can have different colors and radiuses on your lines and your vector shapes. So to look at some of those customizations. So here's our airport style, pointing to an external graphic, which just happens to be hosted on my same local server, but it could be any way you want. You'd want it local just for reliability probably, or maybe on some CDN for speed. Define a point radius in pixels basically. Fill color for stuff that's polygons or like for shapes or circles, whatever. You can have stuff being less than one opacity, so you can have semi-transparent layers on here, which is a really good feature. A whole bunch of basic things built in.
Can you link any of those attributes to the data itself, like the radius, if something's more relevant to the search than something else?
Yeah, and DevSeed have done that for their managing news distribution. Yeah. They have like, you look at Los Angeles on the Drupal Planet feed and it's got a big circle, and you look at somewhere else that's just a smaller circle because there's only been one piece of news coming out of there. And I think they do that through grouped views. Like if you do a views group by, I think that's how they do it.
But they import data as well, huh?
Yep, they use feeds to import it and save it as nodes. So they're not doing the thing we did with the XML feed in the last one. They're actually pulling in from an RSS feed, saving that as a node, and then doing group by, I think.
I'm not sure about the last bit, where everything goes.
So again, going back to our preset, if we look at our layers and styles, we're using the airport style as the default. Don't seem to have any layers and names. Let's see if this works. Yeah, here's our airport node. So we don't have any click behavior, so there's no pop-up or anything, but as we zoom out, we can see that icon stays in the same place. Sometimes it's just a
question?
Yeah.
Has anyone compared the accuracy of the open maps versus the pay maps, like Google and Chrome?
Yes. Who wants to guess which one comes out best? Who says Google? Who says OpenLayers? It depends where you look. It's pretty funny. There's just been a whole bunch of fuss because Google had marked the boundary between some Central American country wrongly. They got it wrong. It's a big deal. OpenLayers, or like just on my own personal life, like I cycled to work from Brooklyn up through Long Island City and Queens across to Manhattan. They had one of the bike paths marked wrongly on Google Maps. I went in, I filed the ticket. 3 weeks later, I got a response saying it's been fixed. Same day, logged on to OpenStreetMap, clicked edit, changed it. The next build, the next day, it was fixed. So if it's wrong on OpenStreetMap, you fix it. If it's wrong on Google, if it's in a part of the world they care about, they might fix it.
Will this give you directions?
This will not, but there are OpenStreetMaps implementations that have directions built in. Now, if you want to do directions in Drupal, so far the only way I know is to use Google's API. But there's no reason you couldn't use OpenStreetMap for like displaying the data and then still use Google to pull in directions. But whatever, it depends on what you need to do. So anyway, just to show the example, this was the airport node edited. And this is, interestingly, how it stores the data. It's called WKT, which is short for well-known text, which is an ironic name because not many people know what well-known text is. But it's just a way of storing a latitude and a longitude.
So in this case, did you actually push the map and it generated that, or did you import that data from somewhere else?
You could do either. Like if you're using the feeds module, you could import it from somewhere else if it's got a latitude and longitude in the feed, or you could pull it in an address field and geocode it on the fly, if you know what you're doing, or even if you don't know what you're doing. If you set up Drupal properly to geocode on save, it could potentially do that. You need to be careful about the number of API calls you're making, but it's possible. Yeah, otherwise you can just have a user interface where people, there's a nice add-on here called OpenLayers Geocoder where you can type in an address, it'll geocode it, put a point on the map where it thinks it is, and then you can fix it if it's wrong. So there's a bunch of good tools around this OpenLayers and Drupal for doing that. So behaviors, this is the interesting stuff. Like this is where all the JavaScript behaviors come into play. So it's just interactive enhancements to add to the map. So for example, the pop-ups we're looking at, those are a particular behavior. Toggling the full screen that I showed at the beginning is another behavior. Drawing points. So just to look at a couple in a bit more detail. So the layer switcher we were looking at where it pops out the box from the side and you can choose which layer you want to use, that's a behavior. If you want a permalink, so you can like zoom to a particular place on the map and then click the permalink and it will just give you a URL that will always take you to that same place. It's a really useful thing that I don't think ever existed in any of the other Drupal mapping modules.
I haven't seen toggle full screen implemented before. Do you get all the same functionality, or does that change?
Sorry? All the same functionality from what?
On the map?
Yep.
Zoom and pan? And
yeah, it's just it's just a JavaScript thing. It just takes up the full size of your screen, so you can still just zoom. You put your layer switcher. Oh, except we don't have any layers in this particular demo. So.
Can you click on the permalink?
Yeah. So let's zoom somewhere that's not the default. Let's zoom into Christian Haven. Permalink. You see it adds to the URL at the top. So if I copy this to a new window, it takes us back to Christian Haven. So that's a really useful feature. And there's other behaviors. So like if you're using views to build your maps, and you don't know exactly how many points there are or where they're all going to fall, there's a behavior that will just say zoom so that all of these points are visible on the map when you load the page. Really useful. And all these behaviors are completely extendable. Like on the Zagat project, we need something where you can pop up a map of all the neighborhoods in your city and click on the shape that represents that neighborhood and click submit, and then it will show all the restaurants from those neighborhoods that you've chosen. And there's nothing out of the box can do that. It took me a while to figure out how to make it work. But all of that's in OpenLayers, and that was just I just wrote an extra module, some JavaScript, and some configuration forms, and it worked. So the CCK side of this, basically you can use CCK to store points like a lat long, or lines, or a polygon. And it stored this WKT, which I mentioned. So here's my content type. The widget's called an OpenLayers map. And you need to choose what kind of map you want to give your editorial team to draw on. And so you have to set up a preset, which they then see. And you have to choose what kind of features you want to let them draw, if it's required, if it's 1 point or multiple. So let's do, use my spellings, I can't remember. So here's my preset. I set it to zoom in on Copenhagen at this particular point. So we've got, up here, we've got a polygon, a line, or a point. So polygons, I've got a pretty weird style. It's got massive chunky lines. It's not really very useful. You can see in here, WKT field is how it's storing it, but nobody really needs to worry about that. We draw a line, or in our case, we're going to just do and usually you probably want to choose between which of those three types of data you want people to draw, because it's, I guess it does work, but you just need to be careful with views, like trying to load in 3 different types of information in one view.
So so this is input, right?
This is input.
So can you use OpenLayers, or you have to do a bunch of customization to, like, does this know that you, as the user who signed in, is the one who put this point in?
Yep.
And that's all?
Yeah, it's
kept?
all just like core Drupal stuff, you know, it's just a node, it's just some extra fields that just happen to have the widget be a map. You know, it's exactly the same as using the date, you know, JavaScript pop-up calendar. It's just a different way of inputting data. And it just gets stored in a particular way in the database. And this all works with MySQL. You don't need to worry about Postgres or PostGIS or any other kind of databases. Which means that then if you're trying to do really crazy calculations in your database queries, you're going to not have all of that stuff available to you. But for simple proximity stuff, it works well. It's now, you know, at this point, it's not going to replace a full-scale GIS server. You know, if you need to do like, does this shape overlap with this shape? Does this point fall in whatever? You're not really going to be able to do that with out-of-the-box MySQL. But if you just care about show me all the restaurants that within 5 miles, you're good.
So is that a CCK field type that's included with the OpenLayers module?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So within, how would you do that? How many restaurants are within 5 miles? There is a buffering ability?
There's an add-on module called OpenLayers Proximity, which does views integration for that spatial query. So yeah, you just need to set up a view in the right way.